Hello, and welcome to another edition of Storytelling on Orchard Street. I'm your host, Pete Solomita. We're in the broadcast studios of P&T Knitwear Bookstore on Orchard Street. And with me in the studio is Madeline Artenberg. She was a photojournalist and a street performer.
Theater performer.
I did that twice now. A street theater performer. You know, I usually print out paper, and I couldn't get the computer to work.
We don't
so I have to do it on my phone.
Ideas getting out there, right?
Before falling for poetry, her work appears in publications such as Rattle, the Poet and MacQueens Quinterly. She was semi-finalist in Margie, the American Journal of Poetry contest, and a finalist in Mudfish 2020 contest. One of her poems was nominated as the Best of the Net 2020 by Poets Wear Prada. And she's also in this book that I'm holding up. It's called Rhymes of the Ancient Mariner, Silver-Tongued Devil. And this is on Pink Trees Press. We're going to talk about that later. And this is how I know you, because this is Philip's work.
It's a great book.
Philip's Giambri, and that's how I met you.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I want to ask you is, how did your relationship with poetry begin or start?
Oh, my goodness. It started in pure hatred.
Hatred, you say?
Yes. The reason is I was like, top whatever of my class, whatever. And I'm used to getting, great marks. So I remember there was a poem, and the assignment was to interpret the poem. And somehow, good girl, usually stuck in the lines,
okay.
But somehow something like, I got on a roll, and the teacher said, no, that's not what this Regents book says. And I was horrified.
Right.
I didn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
So the good thing is that, I laid it aside, didn't look at poetry, just had such an awful relationship with it, and I became a photojournalist. It's a long story.
Right.
But I was doing slideshows for the peace movement. I was in Central and South America. I also lived in Athens for a year. And as I would...
So you're a world traveler.
Yeah, I was a foreign language major. And as I would describe slides, people started saying, that was a very poetic description.
Right.
And I would say, all right, whatever.
So you didn't study photojournalism, you just happened into it. And this experience you just mentioned was high school, and you said you had a similar experience in college. So
they're always saying, they have these books that tell you what the...
Because they wanted you to follow a certain format.
And obviously the dead author didn't say what it meant, so somebody made, it means this, and no one could say it doesn't mean that.
Right. Well, I think most art really can be interpreted by different people. People can interpret it their way.
Exactly.
Great art will do that. Painting, a song, a poem.
Everything.
Anything.
Photograph, everything.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, how did you wind up, changing your mind about poetry?
Okay. I went with friends because we had just come back from Nicaragua, so I went to New Yorican Poets Cafe to hear music.
Is that the first time you were there?
Yeah.
Okay.
And all of this, so it's 30 years ago.
Right.
And all of a sudden...
And it's still that's still standing strong.
Yes.
It's in the East Village.
Yes.
Right. Not too far from where we are, right?
Exactly.
Right.
And all of a sudden there was no music. It was a slam, poetry.
Right. Explain what a slam is to people that maybe...
People are, I didn't even know what it was, but people are like pitted against each other, like in a ring or something like that. And someone up there was reading a poem, and I had a reaction to it, so I was starting to scribble. And my friend said, she's got a poem. I didn't know what it was. So she threw me up there. I read this. I'm shaking. I'm saying, I don't know what this is. It popped out like an alien. I'm not a poet. And then a teacher, a very famous teacher, was in the audience and said, you come to my class on Monday.
That's incredible.
Don't stop.
And you did it.
Yes, I did.
Where was the class?
Writer's Voice.
Okay. What was that, like
it's a very famous school for writing.
Yeah. Okay.
And this was a very famous
in New York
teacher,
City.
Denise Duhamel.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Who's writing a blurb
So
for
you
my
must have
book.
had something to say.
I did. I did.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is I sold my cameras that week.
Oh, my God.
Immediately.
Really?
The minute I found
You didn't keep one camera?
No. Wow. The minute I found that, oh, my God, I have a voice. Like, no one could do my poem, because I was criticized while I was, I belonged to a photo agency, they always said, why can't you shimmy up a pole and get the best shot like the guys do? Why don't you just crawl on your belly? And
that must have been annoying.
Well, someone else could get the better shot, but no one could write my poem like I could.
Right.
So I was.
You found an artistic expression that fit you, that
Absolutely,
suited you.
Absolutely.
To be honest with you, I was a musician for most of my adult life, drummer, and I was on stage. I also did radio and other forms. I never saw myself as a writer either, and I didn't know that I could write poetry. And anytime I made an attempt to write, I really hated what I wrote. And I don't know what happened. 7 years ago or something, I don't even remember how I started. I started writing.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was personal. And then I started making it outside of myself, or hearing stories and making it, or taking a part of my experiences and putting it into someone else's life.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to be an empathetic writer, but
absolutely.
I don't know if I follow, traditional form or either. I'm just writing from my heart.
I'm not a form person.
Yeah, right.
It's all organic, whatever it comes out as.
Right.
It has to serve the poem.
Right.
But the minute the first teacher said, what they did to you was wrong, they didn't know at that time.
Right.
All art is what the audience is as much a part of the art, has their own interpretation, and will very often let the author of it or the creator of it see things that they didn't even realize was in there. And I said, oh my God, I found my home. I was right all that time, to think of what I felt from it.
So 30 years ago,
Yeah, 1992.
Yeah, right.
30 years ago.
But when you were in college, I guess, is that around the time of the Beat Poets?
Yeah, but like I said, I was not having poetry.
No, but I'm saying is, what I'm thinking is the teachers were not hip to that, I guess.
No, they never mentioned anything like that.
Right.
It was strictly what was written down, syllabus and all that. So I had no education in poetry until I started writing and going to events and performing. The minute the first poem came out, somehow I was brave enough to say, okay, I have a voice now. And I immediately started performing. I went to an open reading. Right. And I got hooked on that.
Right. I'm hooked on it too. I don't know what I like better. I like both the writing and I really love being on stage. But I always liked being on stage. I guess all those years of being the drummer and being in the back.
Yes.
And not having a voice and doing other people's music. Now I get to do my thing.
Exactly. Well, I said I've been put in in a drawer for so long.
Right.
Nobody's going to put me in a drawer anymore now because I got stuff to say.
But your life, you traveled a lot, the photojournalism, jobs, like were there, what did you do to sustain yourself all those years?
I was
because you said the photojournalism was
a
side.
Yeah. I was in advertising and marketing. So if anyone has seen Mad Men,
you lived it.
Well, I was the whatever her name was, the woman character, and with all men around.
Right.
And it was a very interesting experience, but. All along that's before I was writing.
What was your role in the ad agency?
Media buyer and planner.
Okay.
Yeah. The only fun thing about that was I would go into a bar to meet men, and they would say, "So what do you do?" And I would say, "I'm in space," because I bought space.
Got it. Right.
Yeah. But
was that hard for you? At that time, was hard to be accepted?
Oh my God.
Right.
They would, the bosses would say, "Oh, you brought in this amazing client that constructs houses, but that's a man's thing. So you just give it to us, and you do the gardening."
I have to ask you. I told you there was a poem of yours I really liked in this book.
Yes, thank you.
And is it autobiographical? This one's Guardians of the Good.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That was one of my jobs.
Right.
I worked for customs. I was an import specialist.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd love to read that.
Oh, you want it from the book? Or?
Yeah, I know. It's on my phone. So
okay.
I have it here. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I love that. And I was wondering, was this...
this was in Rattle. They loved it.
Yeah.
Okay. Guardians of the Good. I had 100 unhappy men under me who never had a woman. Boss, certainly not a slight girl. Openers, verifiers, packers handled incoming mail for U.S. Customs. When I spoke, they cat-whistled and wiggled their middle fingers at me. After the floor captain grabbed a cache of videotapes off conveyor belts, men jammed into the projection room, examined them for anything beyond missionary. I heard their braying, kept to my office cataloging pornography by violation and country of origin, Denmark, Sweden, Holland. When the floor captain burst through my door, licking his lips, he slapped a day's haul of magazines on the desk, took bets on my stammer and blush. After a while, I slept with one eye open while America rested easy.
I love that ending. That's so good.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that poem.
Thank you.
So, what else you have for us that you would like to read?
Yes. Well,
I also really enjoyed what you read. I'm not telling you what to read. You read what you brought or what you want to read. But I really enjoyed Wayne Kroll does a.
Yes,
that's how I
the feature.
Yeah, that's how this all came about for me. So I put the book out in May, and then I needed to get out there. I decided to do. I never did open mics. I did one right before the pandemic, when I started getting the mind for doing this.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic hit and it closed down. And a friend of mine who was on the one of my recent episodes, Phil Gamage, said, I'm doing a reading here, Wayne Kroll.
It's a great space.
Yeah, it's a great space. It's in the bookstore. It's going to be suspended until the new year.
What? Oh,
yeah.
okay.
He's not doing any in December. Anyway, this might come out in January anyway. But I love what you read also. That
Thank you.
I don't know if you brought any of that with you. But
Well, here's what I want to say about not having a voice. So I was, you'll see from this poem. And so when I first started writing and reading, I just thought all the things that happened to me when I was a kid was just me. So I was writing a whole bunch of stuff before the Me Too movement.
Oh, okay.
But I'm so happy that there's Me Too, because now I know it's not just me.
Correct. Good. Okay.
So this is one of the first poems, believe it or not, that popped out
Wow.
that first year of writing.
Okay.
Soft hand. Mother calls for me in skipping tones. Her legs do not support rising. She sits shrinking on a bedroom chair, can't bear the touch of help. I encircle her thin, spotted hand. The softness startles. I do not remember softness. Her flying nails had raked skin raw. She wielded wire hangers. I hid under tables. She caught me by the hair, pulling it along half a house length. Now her eggshell hand tugs at my skirt. She cannot poke her bird head through the sweater neck. Rivulets of wrinkles run down her breasts, the nipples bite her belly. My hard heart shatters.
Wow, that's intense. Tell me something about that. Like where'd that come
That, I would say that all the beginning stuff happened because obviously my mother was abusive. My father didn't do anything. I loved him, but I was not allowed to have friends. No one was allowed to go near me. She threw everybody out of the house.
That's horrible.
We had to hide under the kitchen table if the bell rang.
Right.
Yeah. So the point is, at night, every night for a long, long time, I would pray that I would be dead or my mother would be dead.
Wow,
Not by
that's
my
terrible.
hand, but
Right,
I was
right.
watching
Sure.
Perry Mason,
Right.
and so I started devising like elaborate ways where she would be dead. I didn't do it, like,
I get it.
different things.
Right.
So when I started writing, it was incredible. They all
came
popped out.
Sure. So
because-
they had been buried deep.
Yes,
in, right.
exactly. They were all, and then the other poems started coming, and those I had to work on. But
Right.
these were like,
Right.
released. So it's a very.
It must have been a good
Yeah,
feeling to get that out.
absolutely.
Is it hard for you to read them?
No, I'm so proud of them.
Right.
Because that's one thing I know that anyone who creates, they have a voice, and that's something that's taken, especially growing up. I was growing up the 50s and all
Right.
that.
But you're reading about a place of pain. Do you feel it sometimes when you read it?
Well, when I feel it all the time,
Right.
but when I first started reading, I would start crying in the middle of the poem, and
Right.
people said, "You can't do that."
Right.
So I learned to feel it, because I think the way I read, people have told me, is really good.
Yeah.
I'm in the moment,
Right.
and I'm bringing you all into the moment.
Right.
But it's stopping at the point where I'm going to be crying. I could feel it in here. I'm all
Sure.
agitated
Right.
in here,
Uh-huh.
but I can't,
I
can't
sometimes
do
get
it.
emotional when I'm reading,
Yeah,
if it's something
yeah.
that I really connect with.
Yeah,
But also, I want to be. There's a thin line between being an expressive and being over emotional,
Yeah,
where it would stand in the way of the story.
right.
Right.
I was literally crying.
Right, that would stand in the way of the story being told.
So yeah,
Right.
yeah. And that's why I do. I'm agitated. I could feel it in here, but I want to serve the audience in the poem and just have you be in it with me. And
Right.
whatever emotion. That's another thing. Whatever emotions you have, I don't want to give you my emotions to stand in the way of yours. That's another thing I learned.
True.
So you got to not cross that line.
Right.
Is what
Right.
I was
You want
told.
to make people feel, but you also want to make them feel it in a way that's
Yes.
relevant to them.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. Exactly.
correct me if I'm wrong. You're going to have a book coming out on Pink Trees
Press. Yes.
sometime in 2023?
Early
Is that
2023.
your first book?
It's my first full-length
Full-length book.
30 years of poetry.
Wow, my
So-
God! How do you do that? How do you pick them?
Oh my God! I've been working since July. It's been a very
Because you must have how many poems do you think you have?
Well, I know exactly, because I had to make lists and
Right.
pick them. I have 168 poems, which
Right.
is not that much for 30 years,
Right.
because I really work on
Right.
the things. But yeah, it was a fascinating process, because there was so many poems from way back when. I didn't write that, I said.
Right.
I don't remember a blue
Sure.
thing,
Right.
because they were just pouring out.
So the book is going to contain.
Some of them, because
Yeah.
I rescued some of them.
Right.
With my increased skill now, I was
Right.
able to finish them or change them, but they had started back then, sort of, just subconsciously.
Well, I think it's probably good to include at least some of the early
Oh,
ones
yeah, of
to show
course,
your
of course, yeah.
how you grew as an artist and where you came from.
Always.
Right,
yes.
and maybe some of the early ones, if they lacked in any, write-in expertise, they probably were like that one you just read is intense in an emotional sense, and that's important too.
Yeah, well, I haven't changed Softhand,
Right.
not a lick, because
Right.
like I said, it was born whole.
Mm-hmm. Right,
It was one of the most important things I needed to say.
right.
I would wear long sleeves all the time, because my
Wow.
arms were so bloodied, scratched up.
I'm so sorry to
Yeah.
hear that, really.
And I would speak back to my mother,
Mhm.
and that's the only time I pretty much spoke. She'd hit me on my head with hangers, and I would say, yesterday you were just bragging to the neighbors about how smart I am, and now you're hitting my head?
Right. Can I ask you what became of your relationship with your mother?
That's a beautiful question, because I can see through the progression of my poems. She never knew I was a poet. She died a year after I started writing.
I see.
But through the progression, I was able to heal my relationship with my mother, and I was able to actually step back and see it from her side.
What was her side?
Her side, I would say, is that at that time they didn't know, or my mother didn't know about hormones, and so she cut my father off when she was 48, and so she was just all bitter and awful.
Oh.
But she was awful before that. So I'm
Right.
just saying that I could see that it's the only way she knew, and she thought she was trying to protect me, but it was so bad.
Do you think it might have been part in how she was raised?
Yeah, there's a poem in there that talks about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Because generally speaking, somebody who's abusive probably suffered that.
Wise man.
Yeah.
There's a poem in there.
Okay.
I'm not going to say anything else, but
Okay.
there is a poem in there, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What else would you like to read?
Ah, okay.
And if you don't mind, after you read one, I would like to read one too.
Oh my God,
Okay.
I'd love that.
Sure.
Yeah, I would love that. Let's see. Yeah, I want to read something. Yes, there's another part that I immediately loved about poetry, is that through the miracle of poetry, I could add things that didn't really happen, but still
Right,
serve
sure.
the poem.
Right.
So you'll take a guess on which things I made
Oh,
up.
you're gonna put
in
me on the
here?
spot?
Nah, and anybody will know what I made up after.
Okay.
Brooklyn rush hour. My mini dress rides halfway to crease of thighs, triple degrees inside F train, driplets down track legs stuck to man in front and guy in back, like cheese sandwich pressed on grill. Train pounds into stopping, starts pull out pounding. Back eye falling, wedges knees, hint of hand on my backside. Brooklyn slips by windows, hand slips past borders. Guy works hand up dress, organ pressed to legs. I am silent red like cut tomato on shelf. Seed of scream opens. Hey, creep, keep your hands off me. Lady, he says, I wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot pole. Well, sir, I happen to know you sure don't have any 10-foot pole.
Is that the part you added?
That's the part. I just shrunk into the ground. I was red. I was crying. I didn't know what to do.
So this is something that...
Yeah.
But did happen
the
often?
last part, oh my God. Well, I was wearing mini dresses,
right.
and
but
they were but still.
Well, that doesn't excuse
that.
that.
Of course not.
Men can be pretty creepy, I guess.
But now I get to do the comeback
right.
whenever I read the poem.
You get to take back the power.
And make it funny, too.
Right. You did make it funny. I don't know why I thought you might like this one. This is when love and carnal and culinary, love of carnal and culinary combined. I don't know if I said that correctly. It's called Succulent Tamales. I waited all day to see her, like a schoolboy stumbling in the hall. The invitation swirled in my brain, and I sweated with anticipation. She was deeply pretty, like a movie star in a Spanish soap opera. Her fragrance made me dizzy every time she breezed by me. I couldn't wait to be served one of her delicious homemade tamales, succulent, savory, and delectable, and could render a strong man weak. She put down the plate in front of me, and I let the steam hit my face and grinned like a Hollywood villain. I could barely breathe as I pulled back the warm corn husk in anticipation. The taste salty, savory, and sweet. My tongue tingled with delight. I indulged like a madman as if it was both my first and last meal. The juices ran down my chin, and I cried like a newborn wanting his mother's teat. It was magic, and it had a grip on me like crack on an addict. Would I be invited back? And if not, how would I go on? I looked up to her, and I saw her eyes glisten as she smiled at me. It was then I thought I just might have another chance of her magic culinary delight, to be lost in the dream she served on a plate of spicy splendor.
Ooh, that's sexy. That is really sexy.
I don't do that too often. It's really funny.
Very nice.
Yeah, most of my work's not that sexy.
That's
but
beautiful.
Thank you. So tell me about this group tell me, how you came upon this group.
Oh, Silver Tongue Devils.
Because there's quite a few people in this book, and must have been a great scene, and you met a lot of people through that.
Oh my God, changed my life.
And I get the impression that you have a lot of friends from this.
Well, yeah, Philip and Linda are like some of my best friends, and they're publishing this book for Pink Trees Press. Well, I was going to all kinds of readings. People started to know me. So somebody said, there's this reading that's very unusual. It's in an Italian restaurant, and there's a little stage down there.
What made it unusual?
Because Philip,
there
was a stage, and I had never seen a host do this. He had a camera set up, and he videoed everybody's reading for years.
Wow, that's intense.
And the first thing he did was make a speech saying, I want you all to be the best you can be, and I'm recording you all so that you can learn and see how you're doing and preserve it. And I was like, oh my God, this guy, amazing. So I went for several years, and then it closed down. The restaurant. It was 5 of Cups. Yeah. And so then I met Linda through, she was starting to host another thing. I was in Black and White, which is also closed down. That's a bar. And it turned out, I lived near her. She gave me a ride. We talked as if we'd known each other forever, and now we're very dear friends.
You made connections quickly, but that's a very welcoming crowd as far as I'm concerned.
Incredible. Yes, absolutely incredible.
Right. I did my feature here after coming to the first time, and that's when Pauline was reading that night.
Yes.
And Pauline Finley. She's a fantastic writer, but also incredible reader. It's like watching a one-woman play when she does hers.
She's wonderful.
And that's how I met Linda and Philip. They were there.
Yes. And her book was just published. I'm the one that's next.
Yep.
You know?
Right. And Philip's.
Actually, that's right. It was first Pauline, then Philip, and then now it's me.
Right. Yeah. And I think, is Ron?
Yes, Ron is after me. We're working on me.
He's going to be on an upcoming episode here. Looking forward to that. And it's funny because I think he knows somebody that I think he knows the guy that helped me put this book out, which is just weird. Like how that happens in life. You meet somebody new and they know somebody.
Yeah.
And this friend of mine lives in Iowa. So he hasn't been in New York City for quite a he lived in Brooklyn, moved back to Iowa. And when I don't know how it came up, but it turns out he knows Ron. Cool. I have to ask Ron about that.
Ron knows a lot of people.
Yeah,
that's going to be also a very interesting book.
I bet. He does archives.
Yes. He's a great guy.
Yeah. I think it's just terrific that all you people have been doing this, and it's in a book, and then it's documented on video, and these are real testaments to a poetry movement.
Absolutely.
Would you like to read another one?
Sure. Let's see. Yes, because in fact, there's another topic that, as I progress in age, that I've been writing poems about aging. Mm-hmm. So this is, since I was a young girl. These days, pool's my thing. When up, I run the list. Right leg forward, left leg back, unlocks my hip. Tilt chin, hides the sag. Suck in my belly, slowly bend. Oh no, I scratch. When up again, I chalk the stick. Gentle tap on the cue's sweet spot makes the long shot. High fives for my graying crew as I do the tight jean strut, perfected at Max's Kansas City when I was young.
I love that one too.
Thank you.
I feel a lot from when you read, and I didn't know your history, because that makes it much different for me now. So I didn't set that up. I was just curious where you were born and raised.
Brooklyn.
Okay. So you're a city gal.
Yeah. Well, I lived for 13 and a half years in a lower middle income housing project in East New York.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then, white flight, all that stuff. Uh-huh. So we moved to, drum roll, Trump Village.
No way.
That was Fred C. Trump, Donald's father, and I remember little Donald coming.
Trump Village was at Coney Island?
Yeah, it's Ocean Parkway and Neptune, whatever.
Did you know that he was Woody Guthrie's landlord, and Woody Guthrie wrote a song about how horrific he was as a slumlord?
That's absolutely, I don't know that one, but the elevator, it was 15 floors, the elevator would break every month, and little old people were living on always the top floors, and they were bunking in the lobby. Right. And he would stroll through Trump and the father and this and that, and they'd say, "Oh, we're sorry," but it happened all the time. Right. So I knew from the beginning,
when he developed sections of Coney Island, he basically moved people that were living there. Yeah, and he absolutely. And it was a racial thing. Like he moved black people into an area
that stuff,
that was that had housing that didn't have gas. I mean. Wow. We could talk a lot about that subject, and it's very unpleasant. But I didn't know that. So New York City's in your writing, and I suppose in your book.
But I also lived in Texas for over 2 years, and I had poems about Texas. Right. And then I lived, like I said, in Athens. I have poems about that.
Right. Well, you moved around a lot.
Somewhat.
So to some extent.
Yeah. Now I'm very happy in Queens.
Okay. But you're still. Take advantage of the New York
oh my God,
culture and lifestyle.
Love New York. In fact, I love karaoke, and I was walking down here and I said, "Oh my God, there's karaoke on Orchard Street," because I've only done it once in 3 years, right? And I just really want to get back. Okay, so it's one of the things that helped me be a better performer of poetry, because you're there's no net, and you're up there, and I can't sing, and it just made me braver and to really try
interesting.
and have fun, more fun. Yeah.
Right.
So.
Yeah, for me, I think it was being in bands that has informed me being comfortable on stage.
Absolutely.
You know what's funny? I've only done, well, maybe years ago I did it, but I've only done karaoke, I think, once.
Oh, I'm addicted. Somehow I think
I could probably get addicted, but
somehow I think I'm Mick Jagger when I do my karaoke.
we all do. Isn't that the point of karaoke?
Yeah.
I think deep down we all want to be a movie star or a rock star.
And we can.
Yeah.
But the nice thing is now I can sing.
Awesome.
I've really learned from listening all these years.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's your future in the arts besides the book coming out?
That's really taking so much time. In fact, I'm so excited. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with Philip's tattoo artist.
Oh, okay. Because she's going to do the book, the cover?
The cover.
Right.
She did, Linda Wolkin, she did Philip's cover and Pauline's cover. And they are, spectacular.
Very terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was told, don't come with any ideas. Don't say anything.
Right.
Let her, because she's got the manuscript. So...
Right.
Yeah,
so she read so the book's kind of already put together.
Well, 99%.
Okay.
But the manuscript is just, we're finalizing everything. And so I'm so excited because she's amazing.
Right.
I just don't even know what in the world she would even do, and I don't care. I'm going with it,
I have to tell my the listeners that we did a dry run. Well, it was actually there was a mistake. So we did the show over. And in the first attempt at it, we talked about your history of slides.
Yeah, right.
And I have a feeling you probably have some incredible photographs.
Oh, there's something else. I was a good photographer.
Right. So I'm encouraging you to figure out how to get those out there again. Maybe in the book, a couple photographs.
I don't want pictures in the book.
No, okay.
But yeah.
Maybe at your book release party.
I think that's a brilliant idea, actually. Even just like 2 or something. Yeah. I have really good pictures.
I bet. I want to see them someday.
Cool. Yeah.
Do you have anything else to read?
Let's see.
Before we sign off and say goodbye.
Thank you very much. Okay. Yes, a short one?
Yeah.
Or a longer one?
Well, when you say short, something that's a minute, 2 minutes kind of range.
Very good. Okay. So this is At the Gorilla Forest, Bronx, New York. 3 times I waved my right hand at the female gorilla standing before me, separated by a few inches of impenetrable glass. Each time I wave, she waits, as if deciding were I friend or foe, then picks up her left hand, palm open, folds it closed, brown eyes searching mine, as if she was someone's grandmother come here from the old country, couldn't speak the language, reaching out to her grandchild. My name and that odd little word, okay, were all my grandmother could say in English. All along our walks to the live poultry market, neighbors interrupted us. I never knew if she were the mayor or the gossip of our Bensonhurst block. They hugged my grandmother's lumpy body. She filled their palms with slices of her famous blueberry cheese Danish, saving some for me. She would brush her leathery face across my cheek, kiss me on the forehead for being good, whisper, Shana Madela. I didn't understand, but the look in her eyes was sweet as her pastry. The female gorilla stands before me, gray hair on her hips, one arm wrapped tight around 2 young ones, the other hand returning my final wave. I feel her warm brown eyes pulling at me as I walk away, leaving her pressed to glass.
Wow, I love that. So
I got a little teary.
Yeah. So this experience, seeing a gorilla, somehow triggered memories of your grandma.
Yeah. It just that's what creativity
When did that take
is.
place?
This is maybe like 15 years ago.
Okay.
But that's what I love about it. You're like I said, the world's my palette. My mind can make relationships with anything.
Right.
And I just saw her, it just became my grandmother, the way she was hugging
Wow.
them and so sweet and waving at me. And my grandmother
Was this your
had
grandmother
died.
on your
Well, she
mother's
was
or father's
dead
side?
already, my mother's side.
Mother's
But
side.
she was dead already, and somehow it just connections started getting made.
So she was a good memory for you,
Yeah.
even through
Well,
the.
she helped save me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how so?
Every other weekend I was sent there.
Okay.
So I spent it with my grandmother and
Right.
grandfather. So that was, respite.
So I was going to say
So
a
it
reprieve
was
from
and
what you were going through.
My grandmother could only say, okay,
Right.
But
Did she have any idea what was going on in your household?
no.
And
she
you
was
were afraid to say
speaking- Well,
People
of
didn't talk
course,
about it.
First of all, of course.
Yeah.
And I couldn't speak Yiddish. I could
Oh,
understand
I get
some of
it.
it.
Right.
But I had Lucille Ball, I had
Uh-huh.
Aramis Brooks, so
Right.
I love comedies. I would sit there laughing my head off,
Right.
eating Danish, doing whatever
Uh-huh.
I wanted. It was like a vacation from all of that horror.
That's great.
Yeah.
Any last? Well, I have to say, listening to that story, one thing I like about doing this is that I enjoy the open mics and the features, and but when we do these things, we don't really get to know each other,
Exactly.
and the audience typically doesn't get to know the writer that much. I mean,
Right.
you might say something to
Yeah.
introduce a poem,
Yeah.
but you can't get in depth like this. And
Yeah.
when I found out this was available and that I could do this, my goal is to, not only be able to have people show their work, but for people that follow them, or for new listeners, to find out what informs the poetry
I
and the
cannot
writing.
thank you enough for
Yeah.
doing this,
Well,
because you're right.
Yeah. And that's the important part of it all, right? Is
Yeah.
life. And,
Yes,
you know.
absolutely.
So, Madeline Artenberg, I'd like to thank you for being a terrific guest, and I look forward to your book.
Pete. Thank you.
I look forward to your book coming out, and the book release party. Pink Trees Press always puts together a great.
Yeah, we rock and roll.
They always
yeah.
put together a great event.
Yeah. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you so much. You've been
And
listening.
Thanks for your poem.
Oh, well, thanks.
You got me all hot. I want to eat something.
So this has been Storytelling on Orchard Street. We record this in the P&T Knitwear Podcast Studios, which is a part of their bookstore, 180 Orchard Street in New York City in the Lower East Side. I want to thank Madeline again and the listeners for tuning in. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank Pete. Thank you.